On our broadcast tonight, the shutdown of the federal government now hours away. Chaos in Washington. A lot of American families are about to pay the price. Tonight, is there any chance they will cut a deal? It's here, the other big deadline at midnight. A major part of Obamacare kicks in. Millions have to sign up. And because there's still confusion, tonight we'll take your questions to the woman in charge. Getting out alive, an NBC News exclusive, the story behind the unforgettable image from that mall in Kenya. A young girl, her family was trapped, and the man who came to her rescue. And the Call of the Wild, a spectacular event that draws families from across the country. But is this year's show about to be canceled? Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. It appears likely now that barring a big last-minute change, large portions of the federal government will shut down tonight at midnight Eastern Time, the first time in 17 years. The simplest way to put it is this. The Republican-controlled House is passing bills. The Democratically controlled Senate keeps rejecting. The bills would keep the government operating while stopping aspects of the new health care law. And that's where we are. Live pictures tonight show both ends of this drama in Washington. This is in the hands of Congress, which now enjoys a 10% approval rating from the American people in the latest polls. This will be a long night, and a lot of government services appear poised to go away, at least temporarily. It's where we begin tonight with NBC's Chuck Todd. He's on the White House lawn. Chuck, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. You know, 10% means that's just friends and family at that point for members of Congress. But as of this hour, it doesn't appear Congress is any closer to getting a deal to fund the government. House Republicans are working on yet a new spending bill, but it includes more provisions to try to delay parts of the health care law. And Senate Democrats and the president say any bill like that is dead on arrival. When this clock gets to zero, the government begins to shut down. And yet this morning, the House and the Senate in Washington speak were in recess. Still, many members found time to play the blame game.
And essentially holds the American people hostage.
A banana Republican mindset.
They need to be acting like adults.
I don't care what John McCain thinks.
The hard right is demanding a pound of flesh.
As for the actual budget bill, House Republicans passed one Saturday night to keep things going through the middle of December, but it also delayed the new health care law for a year.
We are not going to mess around with Obamacare, no matter what they do. They've got to get a life.
So when they finally got back to work after lunch today, the Senate quickly stripped the health care provisions out of the House bill and sent it back.
The ayes are 54, the nays are 46.
And behind the scenes, some senators seem more concerned about how all this is playing with the public.
I think we should say here, people have said these kinds of things have happened before.
Late today, he did, blasting Republicans for trying to defund the health care law.
One faction of one party in one House of Congress, in one branch of government, doesn't get to shut down the entire government just to refight the results of an election.
A new poll today shows Republicans would bear more blame for a shutdown. 36% put the responsibility on the president, 46% on Republicans. In Washington today, some frustrated visitors said they rearranged things to cram in Smithsonian visits before a shutdown. Who are you blaming?
Well, me personally, I blame both sides.
If it shuts down, who are you guys blaming?
Oh, man. I say everybody.
Why does it have to come down to like the last minute? We had how long to figure this out, how to balance a budget? I don't get to do this at home when I'm balancing my budget.
It's just partisan politics. Everybody digs their heels in, and the more you dig your heels in, the less you get done. The less you get done, the more angry you get. The more you dig your heels in, and the less you get done. It's a vicious circle.
Late word this evening, Brian. The president placed calls to all the congressional leaders, including Speaker Boehner, their first conversation in over a week.
All right, Chuck Todd at the White House. Let's go to the other end of town. Kelly O'Donnell with a late development on Capitol Hill. And Kelly, all eyes have been on the moderate Republicans, some of whom think it's a suicide mission to go after a 3-year-old settled health care law on this.
Well, Brian, moderate Republicans may be the key here. They don't want to see the government shut down, and they don't want to see their own party blamed for all the harmful effects. So I'm told that New York Republican Peter King is working with a small group of non-Tea Party Republicans, more moderates, who are trying to vote against their own plan from the House Republicans to stop that in its tracks, and then try to work with Democrats with enough time tonight to keep the government opening. It is developing. It's not done yet, but there is clearly a move among some moderate Republicans who don't want to see the government shut down.
As
Brian?
we said, either way, it's going to be a long night. Kelly O'Donnell on the Hill for us. Kelly, thanks. So let's take this story out of Washington, where the talking is going on, where what we just saw is already hitting home across America, after all, and could get a lot worse for a lot of families if there is a shutdown overnight. NBC's Kevin Tibbles with us tonight from downtown Chicago. Kevin, good evening.
Brian, tonight as the hour approaches, thousands of Americans who work in and out of government are bracing for the consequences of a shutdown. At Chicago's Federal Building today, dozens of government workers gathered to protest a possible shutdown. Elizabeth Lytle came on her lunch hour. You worried?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I'm the only one who's a breadwinner right now.
She works for the EPA, a mother and grandmother. Her husband was recently laid off. She is frustrated, angry, and worried.
Congress needs to be turned over somebody's knee and spanked real hard because they're acting like small children.
As the business of government is poised to grind to a halt, federal employees across the U.S. head home not knowing what tomorrow brings.
Gary, how are you going to pay our bills?
And it's not just federal workers. Malik Naveed sells souvenirs near the Statue of Liberty.
The statue is closed. There won't be any business here and less number of tourists.
The shutdown's most visible effects? Padlocking our national parks from coast to coast, along with the National Zoo and museums in the nation's capital. The shutdown will also put federally backed loans for things like small businesses on hold, delay tax audits and refunds, and suspend the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. Difficult for single mother Christina Crowther.
What are we to do to feed our kids? How are we going to feed our kids?
Services which won't be affected include essentials such as mail delivery, air traffic control, and the TSA, along with tax collection, Social Security, unemployment, food stamps, and passports. While more than 800,000 federal workers stand to lose a paycheck, the president and members of Congress will still receive them.
I think they can take those congresspersons' paychecks away.
If you feel that government employees shouldn't be paid, I think you should give up your check.
As for Elizabeth Lytle, she'll need to report to work tomorrow just to find out if she'll be sent home.
They are in the sandbox, and they're kicking sand into the American people's eyes, and it hurts.
Many estimates suggest a shutdown could cost the government between $40 and $80 million a day, and that could hit very close to home for many American families. Brian?
Kevin Tibbles in Chicago for us tonight. Kevin, thanks. Couple of other notes here tonight. While bickering over all this, Washington politicians have not suspended their own effort to raise money to retain their own jobs. Both parties have collected almost $1 billion in the first half of this year, according to federal records. Tonight, they were scheduled to raise even more at a big gala for the Republican National Committee in a government building not far from the Capitol. Speaker Boehner was supposed to attend but canceled. Instead, the GOP turned to a former speaker, Newt Gingrich, who spearheaded the last shutdown when we were at this 17 years ago. Democrats have their own big-ticket event coming up next week at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco, featuring House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and special guest Michelle Obama. Millions of Americans with money in the stock market are paying the price for this budget fight. Stocks sank today on Wall Street here in New York, worried about the effects of a possible government shutdown. All three major indexes down today. The Dow was off more than 128. Now to the other big story of the day, the other big deadline at midnight, the new health care law at the center of the showdown in Congress. A big part of that law will start to take effect tomorrow when people without health insurance can sign up to buy coverage. But our new poll with the Kaiser Family Foundation shows 70% say they are very or somewhat worried they'll have to pay more for their health care or health insurance. And 62% of those without insurance say they are confused about this new law. Our chief medical editor, Dr. Nancy Snyderman, sat down for an exclusive interview with the woman in charge today, Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius.
With all the run-up time to the eve of this, why the confusion today, and why not more enthusiasm?
Well, I think it still isn't real for a lot of people, and there is a lot of confusion.
Is that your fault?
I think we bear part of the responsibility of not being able to get through a lot of the noise.
One of the big concerns is that as the numbers have been tossed out there, we really don't know how things are going to fall, and that the middle class may really take it on the chin.
The middle class, I would say, depending on where that middle class employee worked, has been taking it on the chin.
But when the president says this is the cost of your cable bill or your cell phone bill, that's not quite true.
Well, 6 out of 10 people will have the choice, if they choose to make it, the choice of a policy for under $100.
But the back end hurts.
It's a debate. Do you want to have protection for basically every checkup, every visit, everything that you do? Or do you have a situation where you are making a determination where you and your family don't use medical services that much, and you want to make sure you have protection if something really goes terribly wrong?
But is it conceivable to you that the number of a $5,000 or $6,000 deductible for a middle-class family is a reasonable, feasible number?
Well, I think that families can make a budget choice. If that isn't something that clearly they can pay for, and a lot of people couldn't pay for that out of pocket, they will want a lower deductible.
What does success look like?
Well, I think success looks like at least 7 million people having signed up by the end of March 2014.
This is coming tomorrow. People without insurance can start signing up to buy it tomorrow, October 1st. The benefits then will kick in January 1st, 2014, and you will have until March 31st of next year to enroll. I think a lot of people will start looking at healthcare.gov, where you can look at the marketplace in your own state and then explore your options for your own coverage. There are a lot of options out there. I think people are going to be a little overwhelmed, Brian, when they start to see what this new marketplace looks like.
What a time beginning with this 24-hour period. Dr. Nancy Snyderman, thank you, as always. As the president tried to manage this budget showdown, at least his end of it, he also met for several hours today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, just days after the president's phone call with Iran's president. Netanyahu pushed the president to keep up pressure on Iran to dismantle its nuclear program and said again that Iran remains committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. Netanyahu is expected to deliver that very same message tomorrow at the UN here in New York. In Chicago tonight, several dozen people are injured, though not critically, thankfully, after a frightening train crash during the morning rush. 2 trains collided head-on. Officials say one of the trains was in a rail yard for repair. Somehow it rolled out of the station. No one at the controls. It was doing about 20 miles an hour when it hit the other train head-on. The NTSB is investigating. Also tonight, the head of one of the largest construction companies in all of Southern California and his son are believed to have been on board in a fatal crash of a twin-engine Cessna slammed into a hangar at the Santa Monica airport last night. Federal investigator on the scene says no problems were reported, at least, before impact. Still ahead for us on a Monday night, an NBC News exclusive, a mom and her 5 kids separated, trapped in that mall in Kenya. A rescue captured in an unforgettable image. Tonight, their story of how they got out of there. And later, trading places. Big news tonight about 2 of the most well-known brand names in all the world. As promised, we're back now with an NBC News exclusive. Tonight, we hear from the American family that was trapped inside the mall in Kenya, gunmen all around them. And that family included a little girl rescued by a stranger. Tonight, they are describing for the first time how it is they were able to make it out of there. Their story tonight from NBC's Ron Allen in Nairobi.
The Walton family is grateful for each day together. Catherine and her 5 kids were rescued from the Nairobi Mall, including 4-year-old Portia, a moment captured in this iconic image. Dad Philip was miles away in North Carolina on business as his family lived through a nightmare.
How long were you trapped?
3.5 to 4 hours. It was pretty terrifying.
Catherine and the 3 girls had just come down the main escalator. This escalator in ruins after the 4-day siege.
There was a loud explosion, sounded like breaking glass. Then people started screaming and running. Then I just grabbed the girls and started just running.
The 2 boys were trapped in the grocery store. Here's that store after the siege. The most intense fighting happened here. These exclusive photos show the mall ravaged by gunfire, explosions, and fire after becoming a battle zone.
Portia just laid down flat as she could on her stomach and just put her little hands in her ears and laid there for hours and just motionless and quiet.
We were trying to stay alive.
Local businessman Abdul Haji had come to the mall to help his brother. When he spotted the Waltons, he called to Portia.
I just stretched my hand out and asked her to run, and she just ran towards us. And at that point, I thought she was very, very brave.
What do you say to her to convince her to go? We teach our kids not to go to strangers.
Yeah, I think she just knew that it was a chance to get out.
You're a father of 4 yourself.
She's pretty much the same age as my daughter.
Catherine and the girls got out and learned the 2 boys had already escaped. Haji and the Waltons now share an intense bond.
Love him to death. You know, when we met him for the first time after this started, I mean, I put my arms around him and just started crying.
A family with a brave little girl and a stranger who came to the rescue.
Did your dad tell you about hero?
Ron Allen, NBC News.